Of all the bottles that you have at home, as a percentage, how many of those are blends? Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everybody. Fantastic to welcome everybody in again for another Thursday night vPub. There's no guest tonight. It's just me, back to kind of old school vPub style, I suppose. We've had lots and lots of guests recently, and it's been great fun. It really has. But there's only a few vPubs left until the summer break, maybe only 2 or 3. Currently, I'm looking at either going to the 9th or the 16th of July for the last vPub before the summer break, and then I'll be back again in late August. So it's kind of the subjects or the things that I want to cover before the summer break that I'm squeezing in. And the subject tonight is one that I've been putting off for quite a while, to be honest with you, because for some reason, and we'll explore it a wee bit tonight, blends are not a big draw. They're not super interesting. They don't seem to be embraced with the same enthusiasm these days as malt whiskies, probably, or bourbons, perhaps, or let's say premium world whiskies, whatever it may be. And I want to talk a wee bit about that. I want to give blends their place. But the question asked at the introduction there, asked you guys, out of all the bottles that you have at home, regardless of whether you have 2 or 10 or 110, as a percentage roughly, pop it in the chat. Just let me know how many would you say are blends. I bet it's pretty small. There are folk out there that embrace blends, that enjoy blends, and they have their favorites and things. But generally, this community is built around the enthusiasm and the interest and the curiosity and the knowledge, honestly, for single malts and the variation, the diversity, the selection that category offers us. And honestly, the quality and the engagement and things like that as well. But blends are really what Scotch whisky has been about for way over 100 years, 150 years now. And nothing that we know in Scotch whisky today could exist without blends. Tonight, I'd like to just go through. I've got 6 blends poured blind in front of me here. I know what they are, so it's not really a test of my skills or whatever. It's just to test these whiskies and rank them 1 through 6, and then I'll taste them and I'll go through them with you. And as we go through the blends, we'll talk a wee bit about blends and the place that they have in Scotch whisky and how it's shaped the landscape that we enjoy today, and kind of explore, are there blends out there that we should maybe be enjoying alongside our malts to give our malts context, or because the blends are good value, whatever it may be. In the meantime, I'll jump in and I'll welcome some of the fantastic, beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. Mark Goins is in. Good to see you, Mark. He's saying 2% blends. Pretty small, but at least you have some. Neil Cochrane, 0.5%. Gregor is saying 5%, he reckons. That's quite a lot, Gregor. Mark, good to see you. Only 2 blends out of 40 bottles. So we're talking what there? We're talking 5% there as well, Mark. Good to see you. Catherine Bono, around 10% blends. I usually only have 1 or 2 at a time. Similar to me, Catherine. That looks like a new name as well. You're very welcome here. Nice to have you in. Peter Box is saying 5% as well. Che Francis, if it's blended Scotch, none. If it's blended malt, at least 10%. Interesting. What we're talking about tonight, Che, everybody that's in tonight, it would have been tempting to talk about the Johnny Walker Green labels, the Compass box range. It would have been tempting to talk about various blended malt options that are out there right now, regional malts from Douglas Lane, etc., Monkey Shoulder, Naked Grouse, whatever it may be. But I'm avoiding that because I think that could potentially have a nice discussion for a future vPub somewhere down the line. So tonight we're talking about, the biggest category of Scotch whisky. Almost 85 to 90% of the volume produced and sold of Scotch whisky ends up being sold as blended product. Now, if you work it by value, it's a bit less than that. Malt whiskies are obviously a lot more expensive, a bit more margin perhaps in there, but they generate more value for the industry. But about 85 to 90% of the product sold are blends. Quite incredible. Dominique Schreckling is in, saying about 5%. Fantastic, Dominique. It looks like a new name. Nice to welcome you in as well. Olaf is saying as well, less than 10% is my guess. None of this is a surprise to me, Olaf. Skogsmard is saying 0%. I find none has the peat level I crave, sadly. I get that. Andrew Butler is saying about 10% of my scotches, 6.5% of all my whiskies are blends. Compass Box have elevated blends, says Hoyt Hemphill, and he has about 30. Fastcraft is saying of all the whiskies I've ever had, I guess that the maximum 5% are blends. I'm really a snob that way. It looks to be common throughout the chat here. Donner Pass Whiskey Tim is saying, hi Roy, guest blends are still the king of total volume sold. Yep. Carl Van Wallingham is saying, I have some 500 bottles and about 20 are blends. Wow. So that's what is that, 4%? Am I right? 4%, something like that. So we're all about in the same order. And if I was to make a guess, it's been a long time since I've counted my bottles, and I'm putting that off because I know that it's going to bring anxiety. Not because of the amount of whiskey that I have, but the amount I have open. So I would suggest that I've probably got about 10 or 15 at the very, very most, somewhere at like a dozen blends. So I would say that, again, the percentage that I have is very much along with you guys. And it's kind of that most of the blends that I have are there simply because I wanted to have a blend of some description on hand. I was thinking of going out today for this little lineup I have in front of me to get a Johnnie Walker Red to put in there. But I had a Johnnie Walker Red for a long time and it languished in the collection for far too long. I find ways to get through it because while it is possible to sip and enjoy Johnnie Walker Red, honestly, it's not one that you would choose to do that with, and it's not really what it's intended for, Johnnie Walker Red. Anybody that's known me long enough and followed the channel long enough will know that I've got a wee story that I share about Johnnie Walker Red. That on a train journey home from London, the only whiskey that they had available was Johnnie Walker Red, and me in an empty carriage. The woman who was looking after me, just when asked for a whiskey, she brought 4 of these miniature bottles along and left them with me for the journey. So from about, I don't know, somewhere just north of London until I got back through to Glasgow, I drank all 4 of these bottles. And by the time I rolled into Glasgow Central Station, I was declaring Johnnie Walker Red to be the best whiskey in the planet. But I'd obviously enjoyed and relaxed my way through 20 cl of Johnnie Walker Red by that time. So I was in a comfortable place, let's say. But I wouldn't choose to pour Johnnie Walker Red for anyone, honestly, if I was trying to enjoy a whiskey with them at home. The Johnnie Walker Red that I got through in the end ended up being a base for mixers and cocktails and things like that. And I think that's probably the same for a lot of you guys. The Scotch Spot is saying around 50%. That's another new name, I think, as well. Scotch Spot, nice to welcome you in. 50%, that's incredible. That's a lot of blends. You're obviously a blends fan. That's very, very high. Marcus Kreitner is saying about 7% blended whiskey here. And Peter Box is saying, oh, take out the blended malts, then it's down to 1%. Aha. So in Scotland, we only make 2 whiskies. We make malt whiskey and we make grain whiskey. That's all we make. And from those 2 whiskies, you add any 2 malt, becomes a blended malt. Any 2 grain becomes a blended grain. And any mix of either category becomes a blended Scotch whisky. So from 2 whiskies that we make, that's how we come up with the 5 categories. Arguably, there is a 6th category that's available to some distilleries, such as Loch Lomond. They're able to make something called a single blend because they make grain and malt on the same geographical location. But there's 5 accepted categories for Scotch made from those 2 styles of whiskey. So we're not talking about blended grains tonight. We're not talking about blended malts. But we're speaking about Scotch whisky's heritage, actually, for about 150 years or so, maybe a little more than that, actually. So the Coffey still came out 1830 something. So it's quite a bit more than that. It's about 190 years. So let's say 170 years of that order of Scotch whisky. That's the kind of history that we're speaking about here. And whisky share, Toby, has just worked mine out. It's 22%. It's pretty high, Toby. That's quite a good mix. You're obviously quite well versed with blends. And Chris Brown is admitting, he's saying, I'm a snob, I only have 3 bottles of blends. Well, at least you have some. And I don't think you are a snob because awareness is the first step. So you're saying that, oh, I don't normally reach for the blends and things. But this is not about declaring people as malt snobs or trying to drag them away from their malts to get them to engage with really nice blends. It's really not, that's not kind of what I want tonight to be about. It's just to explore these blends and kind of give them their place. They're very, very significant, not just in the history of Scotch, actually, but globally in the history of whiskey. When Scotch whisky started out, everything was sold bulk. Glass bottles were, poor people didn't have glass bottles. They had kind of any container, whether it was made of ceramic or wood or whatever. They had any old kind of container at all. If you were a bit wealthier, maybe you had glass bottles and things. And if you had a clear glass bottle, you were really well off, because that was, not only was it more expensive to make, but it was taxed a lot higher as well in the UK, clear glass. Whereas mixed glass, brown glass and things like that was a bit cheaper. So what you would do is you would take along your empties, your jugs, your whatever it is you got filled, you would take it along to a grocer, and they would simply dip into their cask of whiskey that they were buying in bulk, and they would decant it into whatever container you had and charge you by the volume that you bought. The problem back then, and we're going back to the early 19th century, was the malt was already inconsistent, not just inconsistent in its profile, because it was coming from lots of different sources, lots of different distilleries, but it was inconsistent in age. And it was inconsistent because it was coming from an individual wooden cask oftentimes. It was also inconsistent in terms of quality. So what happened in time is that these grocers started to make their own blends. They were mixing their own malts together in order to try and bring something that they could draw customers to their grocers, their delicatessen or Italian warehouse, as it was maybe known in Scotland back in the day. And these were importers of European goods that sold them through their delicatessens. And they were trying to draw people in from their reputation of having a particularly good whiskey available. So that's where blending started out before the next big step came along. Falsgraf is saying, aquavitae, you drank out of cups and jugs, not nosing glasses and Glencairns. That's right. I mean, even sitting at home and drinking from a nice crystal glass was really the preserve of, or any glass, honestly, was the preserve of the wealthy. Absolutely, Falsgraf. I agree with you fully. Jimmy Jazz is in. Great to see you, Jimmy. Saying taking out the blended malts drops from 5% to less than 3%. And Whiskey Weekend Dram, fantastic to see you, buddy. I always have one simple blend on my shelf to start a flight or something like that. That's why I buy them. But a Mitchell blend or something like that is more a sipper for me. What I've tried to do tonight is avoid the specialist kind of Cadenhead's Mitchell's blends. I've tried to avoid ones that are perhaps... with one exception, lots of people were recommending that I went out to kind of Aldi's or Lidl's or something and bought one of those kind of supermarket exclusives that's got a really good reputation and have scored really well by people enjoying them. And I think they would be fantastic blends, honestly, to have. Very inexpensive, very enjoyable, can use them as a mixer or a sipper, fantastic. However, they're not going to be very well known by a lot of people. The only exception I make is that one of the blends that I have in the lineup tonight is a discontinued blend, but it's a legendary blend. And I wanted to see if it was warranted, so I've put it in this lineup. Scogsmart is saying, why is it that most blends which claim to be smoky fall far short of the peatiness of smoky single malts? It's true, Black Bottle was famously a pan because it was always known to be a peaty blend, or let's say smokier than most, still not as smoky as we're used to from Islay single malts, of course. But for a time, it was the peaty level, the peatiness level in Black Bottle almost disappeared. And it's only in very, very recent times that peatiness is coming back on stream again. If you check out the Black Bottle website in recent times, you'll see they talk about smoke and peat quite heavily. We have to remember that our thirst and our desire and our passion and love for Islay single malts, the full-on peat, more peat the better, please, is very, very recent. This century recent. Yes, there was peat fans in the late 80s and the 90s. It was started to become a thing, but it's only really taken off as a category in the last 20 years. Heavily peated single malt. There was a time in the 1980s, let's say, that there was a lot of distilleries on Islay making unpeated campaigns because they had more peaty whiskey than they needed, which caused a problem when things like Lagavulin took off. Okay, and Lagavulin 16 in the mid 2000s, 2006, 2007, that went on allocation. There really wasn't enough mature stock around to keep Lagavulin 16 in the volumes that had been started to get taken up in. So Lagavulin 16 disappeared for a little while. Our desire for really peaty whiskies is a fairly recent phenomenon on a global scale, let's say. We have to imagine that before blends came along, malts were being enjoyed, and you tended to enjoy the malt that was kind of geographically close to you. So back in the late 18th, early 19th century, that would have been a thing. You would have been enjoying malt whiskey, often single malt whiskey, and it would have often been incidentally peated, depending on which distillery you were buying from. Gregor is asking, is Lynn watching? Assuming your bottle count is at 500, the barflies confirm you have 2.45% blends. I think Lynn is, she's resigned herself to just giving up. She only gets annoyed when she's tripping over bottles now. She's accepted that it's a thing. And I suppose if we were to ever have an argument about it, I think I would threaten taking up an interest in classic cars or something. Kilted Miss is saying, I always like the cheap Campbelltown Loch blend. Yeah. And the Banknote 5-year-old, both were around the 20 quid mark. Excellent, Scott. Absolutely. And I think that there's lots of theories out there that the more revered blends tend to be malt heavy blends, which doesn't really paint grain whiskey in a good light. Which is kind of the next stage. So after these grocers have started blending their own blends in their shops to kind of try and bring up the quality, certainly try and manage consistency, along comes Aeneas Coffey in 1830 with his new invention. I mean, he wasn't the first to invent it, but he refined the design to make it much more efficient. To the point that it's still incredible to this day that the Irish whiskey industry turned its back on the invention, on the coffee still. Aeneas Coffey is an Irishman. And they decided that they wouldn't really adopt it. They weren't interested. But he brought it to Scotland in 1831 and, of course, changed the Scotch whisky landscape. So what they were able to do with his invention was they were able to, through this continuous still, move away from the batch production of a pot still, which is a big, huge copper kettle, but come to this continuous still with the ability to basically make good quality, let's say, or consistent quality spirit, much lighter but higher alcohol, but make it 24 hours a day, pumping it out there. That then gave them a base. These grocers could then have this grain base that they could flavour with malt whiskey. Malt whiskey was often quite challenging. I mean, obviously, I haven't tried many of the whiskies from the day, of course. But the story goes that they were not just inconsistent, but some of them were really they could be powerful and acrid and difficult. And you would have to kind of just blend them out and kind of use them as seasoning and flavouring and things like that, much in the way we do in modern blends. So that's what these grocers started to do. And that's where all of the blends that you know are famous the world over, Dewar's, Ballantine's, Johnny Walker, of course, Arthur Bell for Bell's. I mean, all of these came from retailers, from grocer shops. Then that industry became bigger, of course, than everything else they were doing in there, and they branched out into whiskey exclusively in time. But it was that coffee still that changed everything. Suddenly, they had a product that they could guarantee its consistency and brand it. When there was a brand applied to it, that implies consistency. It's going to taste the same, this new bottle you've just bought, as that last bottle that you've just bought. And that came around roughly the same time that glass started to be taxed differently, and it became a wee bit more affordable as well. So you were actually buying a bottle of whiskey, and you weren't buying it bulk and taking it home and serving it out of the bulk container, or getting your butler to bottle it for you if you were wealthy enough. Chris is saying Black Bottle is owned by Distell now, I believe, so I wouldn't be surprised that there's some Lechick and P.T. Bunnahabhain in there now. That makes absolute sense. Everyone is saying in some ways aged whiskies are a luxury item. Blends are often entry-level purchases for folks that don't like beer and wine on a serious budget. That's absolutely true. Blends are a mass market product. They tend to be almost exclusively bottled at 40%. There are loads of premium blends out there from Chivas Regal, from Ballantine's, especially from Johnnie Walker. There's lots of premium blends out there that carry age statements and not. But generally, they're a lower cost option. The big volume stuff is of the order of £20 UK currency and less. Jimmy Legg is saying, what percent of Spice Tree is Clynelish? Anyone know? Doc? No, Jimmy, I don't know off the top of my head, but if you jumped on the Compass Box website, I think you'll find that they'll be quite happy to tell you. If they don't tell you, and if they tell you how much Clynelish is in there, they may not tell you the age of it. But if you drop them a wee email, I understand that they will. Daniel Gray saying, I'm super keen to get my hands on North Star Sirius. My whiskey journey has taken me through single malts, but I'm open to try my eyes to good quality blends and keen to try more of them. Absolutely, Daniel. 31-year-old North Star Sirius was available on offer for way under £100, £80, that kind of order, for 31-year-old whiskey. But that's blended malt. That is malt whiskey still. So there's no grain in North Star Sirius whatsoever. Eric Cunliffe is in. Good to see Eric. He's saying, I cut my teeth on Teachers, but noticed its quality slipped largely years ago. Now my go-to is the Adelphi Dancy Man. Not many decent blends around here in Ontario. I guess it's so much to do with your geographical location, isn't it always? Graham Fraser is saying Aberfeldy Distillery has a display showing all the malts that went into Dewar's blend in the early 20th century. 70, I think. Early 20th century, it would have started to get to that number when the amount of distilleries became really in the late 19th century, late 1800s. There was a huge boom and a lot of distilleries opening. Absolutely. And what we have to remember as well, that along this route, obviously the Licensing Act coming in 1823, the fact that grocers started to blend their own, the fact that they were allowed to apply duty to tax and excise to it after they blended it, after it became a bulk thing, after they were selling it by the bottle rather than have to pay that up front, that all changed the landscape. But lots of serendipity comes in and changes everything that we know about, well, life, I suppose, but Scotch whisky generally. And in the late 1800s and 19th century, there was another thing that happened, and that was a louse, an infestation came in from the New World into Europe and attacked the European vines. And the European vines didn't have any protection against this thing, and it wiped out the wine industry, brandy, it wiped out cognac, it wiped out middle-class drinking, let's say, right across Europe. Fortunately, Scotch whisky was reasonably well placed to step in as a substitute, and they did that exactly. They started to sell the products up and down the UK and beyond across Europe as a substitute for brandy in the late 19th century, and things took off. To this day, go to France, visit France, and pay attention to how the ratio of Scotch whisky that's on the shelf behind the bar versus any other drink. It's amazing. Gavin is saying, I buy all blends at auction and they are very good from the 70s and 80s. Gavin, don't turn away from the 90s blends from auction as well, the 1990s, because remember in the 90s, they would have been drawing from a very deep and mature stock from the slump in whiskey demand during the 80s. My favourite Johnny Walker Black Label I have on hand right now isn't the 70s and 80s version. It's actually the 1990s version. It's a delicious bottle that I have. I've poured a Black Label here tonight. It's the orangey red colour, that kind of orangey red colour. If I pick it up, I don't know if this is it, you will be able to see potentially as I sip it tonight, the wee dot on the bottom of the glass. I'll just see a white dot from the top looking down. I won't know what I'm sipping, but I'll be able to tell you how I'm getting on with the whiskey and things like that. So this is a contemporary Johnny Walker Black Label. I bought this fairly recently, only to compare it with the can't remember which I opened now. I think it was either a 70s and 80s or an 80s and 90s, something of that order. It must have been the 90s I opened. And I was comparing them just to see how they were. And that's the one that I got on the best with. I loved it. Still do love it. Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying, yes, the damned phylloxera. A chance for Scotch. Absolutely, Greg. And Greg, you'll probably be able to testify just to how big a thing Scotch whisky is in France. And it remains the case that while the USA is the biggest market for single malt, France is the biggest market for whiskey generally, and that's because of blends. Hillswood is saying, not Scotch, I know, but the current crop of Lakes blends are not too bad. Some interesting finishes too. I mean, we're talking about Scotch whisky tonight, of course. We're talking about all the blends I have in front of me are Scotch whiskies. And the reason for that is not because I want to exclude the fantastic blends that are out there, world blends and things, but it's just kind of giving it that place, giving it that kind of place in history, to have a wee think about branding, have a wee think about how it came to be and the scale of the thing, and yet how little we actually engage with it, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Like I say, I will not use tonight's vPub to try and pull anybody away from their malt experiences, because I think generally they're different things. Very different categories with different ideas. Peter Box is saying, I'm pretty sure I can pick out the Clynelish and Great King Street Artists blend. Well, I'll tell you that one of the ones I have in front of me here, Peter, is that very one. This is the first time I've had the Artist blend. I enjoyed my time with the bottle of the Glasgow blend, which I also have here. And this is the first time I've bought this. So, you know, I had a wee dram of this last night on the couch in front of the TV. Loved it. I had a wee dram of the Glasgow blend. I still love that as well. I have a strong feeling that they will appear in the top 3 out of these 6 tonight. I wouldn't be surprised if they're first and second, and we'll talk a wee bit about that. But if they're not, that's fine. It's just me sipping these tonight. Whatever's going to end up in the top 3 and whatever's going to end up in the bottom 3 is just a kind of fun distraction. It's nothing defining. It's just kind of me. I've already been sipping through these before we went live tonight. One of these is awful. Honestly, one of the ones I'm sipping is awful. I'm not looking forward to drinking it. I probably won't finish it tonight, but we'll talk more about that in a wee while. Hoyt is saying Black Label is decent. Green Label is better, but it's a blended malt. Absolutely, the Green Label is a blended malt. Laddie is in saying, which blend should I try before I die? Let's see if we can answer that tonight. I think, I don't know if it's first tonight, but the Artist blend that I was enjoying on the couch last night was going down very, very well. I went back and had another wee dram. I was enjoying it that much. And it was sipping it as a sipper. Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying, yes, Scotch blends are mostly bought there, but fortunately, thanks to some dynamic retailers and whiskey shows, French managed to make the single malt category grow a bit more than, say, 10 years ago. Same as any country that's producing their own whiskies as well. It should be growing quite in good health. Jimmy Legg is saying, it's not the flavour of blends that I mind, it's the thin mouthfeel generally. Far more to do with the fact that, yeah, of course it's grain whiskey, a big chunk of grain whiskey in there, which can be a bit thinner. But most of it, Jimmy, as we all know, is out there at 40% ABV. It's going to be chill filtered as well. I have to say, one of the things I love about whiskey generally is when you have a nice coating, oily, unctuous, viscous malt. I think its texture is one of the biggest things for me. So I feel exactly what you're talking about, and I agree with you that they can be a wee bit thin. Keith Corbett's saying the bar bottles I saw everywhere in France included a Glencameron blend, tasted like caramel tinged vodka. Some of them are almost unrecognisable to even to Scots, let's say. A lot of these brands are export brands. They only appear in export markets. And some of them will be a bit rough. Honestly, they'll be very young, very heavily towards young grain spirit as well. And without colouring in the bottle, I imagine they would look pretty pallid to look at as well. Andy Calder was saying about different landscapes, different options. Absolutely. And you know what? See if you find yourself in a really warm country or someplace in a really warm day, do you really want a big, heavily meaty, full-bodied malt? Or do you want something a bit light and easy and fizzy, something that you don't have to have any guilt about throwing over ice or adding a mixer? So they definitely have their place. Thomas Elmer, good to see you, Thomas. Fantastic to have you in, my friend. Maybe this already came up, he's saying, but even more rare in my collection is a single grain whiskey, only one, Strathclyde 30-year-old from the Glasgow Garden Festival. Wow, the Glasgow Garden Festival, I remember that well. I attended that a few times. It was 1989, I think. So yeah, 30 years ago. I tried to buy a Tweeddale blend. I was in a hurry. You'll see it over my shoulder. It's here in that tall cylinder there. And it's on Amazon as a blended Scotch whisky. And I had a look, and it was a picture of the single grain of truth Tweeddale. But I figured, like, it's Amazon. They've put the wrong picture in. I'm going to, hopefully that's priced around about blend money. I'll buy that and see how they go, because the Tweeddale is famously 46% unchill filtered natural colour blends. But when it arrived, it was a single grain. The picture was right and the description was wrong. So I've got myself from Amazon here a Tweeddale grain of truth single grain. I've got a couple of single grains there. I don't reach for them often. They're very sweet to me, sometimes a bit too sweet. Mature, especially from nice active cask single grains, can start to behave a little bit like rum to me. And it tends to be a single dram event. It's not something I want to go back and pour another glass of. So I do keep my mind open. I've tasted some fabulous single grains, honestly, really wonderful stuff, and really, compared to malts, quite affordable. But I don't reach for them. Gavin is saying, for me, the point of drinking blends is to educate my palate. I get that, Gavin. Absolutely, I do. But a blend, especially a blend that's got 30, 40, 50 malts in there, it's going to be so complex, let's say, to use a polite word, or kind of, if you want to go to the negative end of things, just so rounded out, so smoothed out, that picking up any definition on the palate starts to become a struggle I'm speaking about for me. So you tend to focus on the bigger experience, the wider experience, rather than what you would do with a malt, where you're going in to try and tease out individual components of flavour. That's how I tend to find it often with blends. But I'm going to give it a try tonight. And Hoyt is saying, have you ever tasted Serendipity from Ardbeg? Bought it from an online auction, but never opened it, keeping it as a novelist. Saw it on an Ardbeg tour, but I didn't want to embarrass them. I've never tried the Serendipity. I think that was the blended. Did they not do something silly with that? If I remember well, it was some kind of vatting of two malts, and they said that it was by mistake. I was always a bit suspicious. Was it actually a genuine mistake, or did somebody genuinely vat the wrong whiskey into the mix or something? I don't know. That's kind of just a memory rattling around in my head, Hoyt. That's a story like that. And Andy C is saying he's loving his North British 23-year-old tonight, but I agree, one is enough. Depending on what it is and how mature it is, 23-year-old is getting on. I mean, there's going to be quite a rich, round, smooth sweetness in that. Normally. Sometimes it comes across like a bubblegum sweetness. Sometimes it's like a very kind of powdery sugar sweetness, a bit like candy floss sometimes. Sometimes it's, but all of it, it tends to be a bit too confectionery sweet for me. I'm going to go in on this one that's absolutely bogging. I'm convinced I know what this is. Bogging, a very Glasgow word, I apologise. But this isn't nice. And I've reached for oatcakes tonight. I don't normally eat on a vPub, but the reason I've reached for oatcakes is purely because of this dram. It's acrid. So if we talk about the sweetness of a grain, that's here, but it quickly turns very bitter, like saccharin, like artificial sweetener. That's in this in spades, along with a kind of charred note, and it's quite acrid. It noses okay, caramel, maybe some fruit of kind of cooked fruit, poached fruit, that kind of. But I'm reaching. You'd maybe think there's a hint of smoke in there, but it's maybe like a char type thing. I'll tell you what I think this is. And by the way, I don't care if I'm embarrassed tonight if I get any of these wrong. It might actually be quite interesting if I get them wrong. These are not blind. These are semi-blind. It'd just be a matchup for me. I know what the 6 whiskies are. I poured them. Although I did mix the glasses around. If you ever doubt that you can mix around glasses and forget which order they're in, as long as the glasses are unmarked, put a wee dot or colour or something underneath it. You can't tell, of course, but it's very easy to confuse yourself and not remember what orders anything, and certainly it's easy for me. But this isn't a... I often say that if you find yourself in a pinch, any port in a storm, if the only whiskey that's available is X, then fine, you'll drink it regardless of what your opinion is on it, because it's more about the people and the company. And that's probably true for this as well. You could probably get away with drinking this, but I would probably be keen. I think I would probably be keen to dilute this. That's my least favourite of the lineup. I'll take you through what the other whiskies are that I have. Mentioned the Great King Street from Compass Box Artist Blend. What's really interesting about this and their Glasgow blend equivalent is that this is supposed to be like a peat sherry mix, and this is more of a Highland Speyside mix. Both of these are bottled at 43%, so a wee bit higher ABV. They're priced more expensive than typical blends. This is more in the realm of kind of 10-year-old, 12-year-old gateway scotches and things like that. This is in the 30 odd pounds to buy. I hope that I end up feeling that that's worth it. I've really been enjoying them. I enjoyed the Glasgow blend bottle that I had. These are 50 cl bottles, by the way. The previous one I had was 70. I don't know if they've suddenly changed to 50 cl, but I bought these and I was surprised to see them come as 50 cl. But what's interesting about that, 43% presentation, and they're unchill filtered. That's a very rare thing to see in whiskey, that the fact that they take it down below 46% ABV, so they're clearly bringing it down to that drinkable blend percentage of 43, but choosing to unchill filter it, body texture, that kind of thing. Don't take out any of the oils, don't take out any of the fatty acids, all the things that give whiskey, we understand, its texture and a lot of its flavour. Might make it cloudy, might make it a wee bit more unstable. It might mean that it goes a wee bit kind of misty when you add cold water or an ice cube. But if you know whiskey, you'll know that that's not anything to worry about. Whiskey Novice Jim is saying, on holiday in Tenerife last year, I introduced myself to Chivas, JW Black, and Grant's as cheap. from the local drams. In a pinch, as you said, they were grand. Would I buy them again? Dunno. Aye, but that's my point about those whiskies. It might not be something. It might not be something that you have at home. But it might be something that's in a bar. They don't have a lot of selection, or you're at somebody's house that they're not whiskey drinkers. They've got a blend on hand. They'll share it with you. They'll want to know your opinion, and they'll just want to have a whiskey with you and talk about whiskey maybe. For all of those reasons, after a couple of drams, you find that they get better, honestly. Sunday Evening Scotch is in. Michael is saying, I love Glasgow blend, sherried Craigellachie and Lafroig. How can you go wrong? Again, we know that because Compass Box put it on their website. They tell us that it's Lafroig. The Craigellachie we have to guess because they say it's a distillery near Aberlour. So it's only going to be Aberlour, which it won't be, Pernod Ricard. Macallan, it's not going to be that. Or Craigellachie. We understand it to be sherried Craigellachie and Lafroig, as well as a few other things in there as well. I think the grain that they use is Cameron Bridge. Pretty sure it's Cameron Bridge, which is a Diageo Lowland blend. Scogsmart saying, did you know that Black Grouse started as a Scandinavia and duty-free exclusive peated version of the famous Grouse blended Scotch? Maybe once in the distant past I knew that, Scogsmart, but I'd forgotten about it. I've not even been thinking. I can't tell you the last time I even thought about Black Grouse. I'd almost forgot about it. But yes, it's very much still out there. John Glaser himself told me that it was sherry Craigellachie, says Michael, Sunday Evening Scotch, as he poured me a glass at a whiskey event. Out of all the guests that I've been asked to bring onto the vPub, John Glaser is currently sitting head and shoulders above, well, apart from Ralphie, that is. Ralphie's always going to be the most requested, I think, but John Glaser is sitting head and shoulders above all the Dave Brooms of the world, all the other whiskey makers that I haven't had on yet. So I think I'm getting to the point that I'm going to need to figure out a route to John Glaser and ask him politely to come on, maybe after the summer break. Let's see if he'd be interested in doing that. I think he used to be quite shy about that kind of thing, but we've seen him popping up a lot more now, being a lot more kind of active and a lot more collaborative. I hope that he would be interested. Jimmy Legacy saying, I thought I was second. Oh no, Jimmy, if we're talking about the community, that's a different category altogether, and you're head and shoulders above everyone, my friend, of course. Okay, let's move on to the next one. I don't know if that's what's in the glass, but I'll tell you the other one that I've got in the lineup here, as I mentioned earlier, is a Johnnie Walker Black Label, 12 years old, 40%, ubiquitous, it's everywhere, famously responsible for turning a lot of people into whiskey generally, into malt enthusiasts as well. Scott from Scotch Test Dummies famously talks about Johnnie Walker Black Label being his gateway whiskey. That's not what's in this glass. This is a lighter thing. Everything was light and delicate, behaving a wee bit like a nice Glenmorangie or something like that, right until the development, and then the finish kind of went acrid. It went that kind of grain thing. And when there's a high percentage of, especially if it's younger grain, it does have that kind of acrid finish that's not quite as nice. Would I guess what that is? I think that might be... it can only be one of two, I think. And I think it's this one, Hanky Bannister. Not bad. I mean, this is a lot of fans. It's been a product for a long time, Hanky Bannister. This is from Inver House, I think. So the other blend that I really, really enjoy is another Inver House blend called Cato's. Comes in a green bottle. That's a lovely sipper, very tropical and light, very easy drinker. Cato's blend. If you ever see it in a bar or whatever, order yourself a wee dram just to have a sip of it. You might be quite impressed. That's finished now. It's sitting through in the recycling basket. That's gone. I couldn't share that with anyone tonight. But Hanky Bannister is another Inver House blend. But I think I've had this in the cabinet for about 5 years. And you can see the level that it's at. So that's what I mean, it's not that it's a bad blend. It's just that it's kind of, I'm going to put it behind that glass because I think that's what it is. and I'll share the other two with you. I think this is an older bottling, honestly, looking at the branding. I'm not very sure. This was brought round to me by my father-in-law. In the bottle, it's very dark, but honestly, there's a wee bit of colour variation. I think this is the one that I'm not enjoying tonight. I think this is the one I've put in 6th place. It's a White and Mackay. I think we can safely assume that that's that dark red, not because of use of high-quality active sherry casks or virgin oak. I think that it's that colour from, well, colouring. I don't want to beat it up, but I think that my experience of this bottle, not had much of it. Was this sealed when it came round? It might have been. So I'm not very sure what's happened to this. It's maybe getting drunk. Maybe I'm passing it off on guests that I don't want to stay long. No, I don't think so. It might be that bottle got brought round here when it was open. I'm not sure. But I don't recall ever pouring it and enjoying a dram from it. So that's why I'm drawn to suggest that 6th place one tonight is that. But as I say, if I end up embarrassed tonight, I'm okay with that because it's about the whiskey rather than me. It's just my kind of best guess of what I think about the whiskies tonight, just tonight. Simon Ray's in, but I bought a Clan Fraser for sentimental reasons, and because he's descended from Fraser's, fantastic. Not great straight, but with a mixer and ice on a hot summer day, it hits the spot. That's exactly what so many of them are supposed to be doing. Ralphie loves the age statement, and Hanky Bannister, doesn't he? Yeah. Is there an age-stated Hanky Bannister? This is non-age statement. This is just Hanky Bannister original. So he's probably a fan of the kind of the age-stated one, if that exists. I've never actually seen it. I bought this, thinking about this now, I bought this at Balblair Distillery. And I bought it because you don't often see it, not on a you could probably get this online very easily, but I bought it because it's not something you would see on a supermarket shelf. By the way, can I apologise that there's the camera is mounted on a boom arm now, which is fine. It just makes it easy for me to shove it out the way and pull it back in, rather than it being on a stand in the old days. But if I'm bumping yeah, it does wobble. There is a bit of a wobble because the boom arm's mounted to the table. I might have to fix that. I hope it's not putting anyone off tonight. Probably you weren't noticing it until I've pointed it out. And Hoyt is saying Serendipity is a blend of mature Ardbeg and young Glenmorangie, probably back from the day when Glenmorangie was owned by Glenmorangie, of course. Collectible but not loved. I see. Tom Harris saying, have you had Black Bull 12? No, I've not had that, actually. That's a Duncan Taylor brand, I think. 50% malt, 50% grain, and 50% ABV. I found it very enjoyable. Completely aimed at probably a different market there. Nice that they know that they share with you the proportions of malt and grain and the fact that they bring it in at that higher ABV as well. And that probably means that they're putting out their unchill filtered. Fantastic. Graham Fraser is saying JW Black is on offer at £20 in Sainsbury's. Excellent. Hanky Bannister 40 is very good, says Andrew Butler. Wow. Jimmy Legg is saying even the even crappier Dalmore. Talking about the White Mackay, maybe. Zach Andrews in. Cheers, Roy. I have missed a few of these lives as I have been busy. I don't mind if you're keeping busy, Zach. I don't mind if you don't make the vPubs. They're always here on the replay if they fit around your lifestyle. Honestly, these are long things. I know. As long as you're healthy, that's what's most important. I'll pick up this middle glass and I'll say cheers and thank you for your virtual dram, Zach. Always a pleasure to have you in, my friend. Cheers. Puff of smoke. Very rounded, very rich. A little bit thin. Oh. And it dies on the finish. That's a shame. Everything was good. Everything was very good right up until the finish there. Wow. Okay, now that's got me second guessing what that might be. I was convinced that was Johnnie Walker Black Label. I think it is. It's just a shame about the really drop off a cliff into bitterness finish there, because everything started quite nice. Forgive me if I use the word smooth tonight. I know a lot of people don't like that word being used as an adjective to describe whiskey or a tasting note, but it's just as valid as any other adjective you would use, especially if the company at the inn know exactly what you're talking about and how to hear and interpret the word. There's a smoothness to this. There's a roundness to it. It's easy. It's rich. Slightly drying. Then at the end it goes bitter, and that's a shame. Just have a wee nibble at this. And I'll show you the outsider that I've brought in tonight as well. This is long discontinued. This was a Glenmorangie product. Bailey Nickel Jarvie, one of the nicest branding in whiskey, not just because the really cool kind of Victorian era label, but the messaging and the language on it as well is kind of tongue-in-cheek and quite fun. Blend of old Scotch whisky, sole proprietors, Nickel, Anderson & Co. Limited, Queen's Dock, Leith. Very old reserve, age with honour. Now this is an age statement because in very small font, very small typeface down here, it tells you that nothing is under the age of 8 years old. So it's an age-stated blend. You have to buy this at auction now. The prices are creeping up a wee bit. I would say if you're a collector and you want it to have it on the shelf, pay the auction prices for it by all means. But as a sipper, it's a good blend. In my experience, I've spent a bit of time with this one, but it's still a blend. I felt this one was the Bailey Nickel Jarvie. Quite tropical, quite bright, quite nice, clean white fruit. Pineapple-y, peachy. Sweet, floral. Greg's Whiskey is talking about, don't forget the Campbellton Loch, full of Springbank good stuff. A bit more obscure blend, but an absolute cracker. This is nicer. Still a wee bit thin, yes. Still goes a wee bit bitter on the finish. So even if the grain whiskey, if this is a Bailey Nickel Jarvie that I'm sipping here, I could be wrong. Still has the ability to drop off at the end. In fact, that would be the same with that Johnnie Walker because that's 12 years old as well. So even the grain in that is 12 years old. Wee bit of housekeeping to do. On Sunday night, very short notice, I'd been kind of kicking around the idea with patrons if a Zoom meeting would work so that we could just kind of hang out together, get together face to face. I could see you, you could see me, we could talk. But I knew it would have to be a short notice thing because I was just going to experiment and do a bit of a dry run with it. I did that on Sunday night. 40 of you turned up. Thanks to everybody that turned up, even though it just popped up that night and you dropped in. I would plan that out in advance next time. I apologise to all the fantastic people that did join in that I didn't get a chance to speak to directly. Thank you so much for your understanding and your patience. But next time around, I'm going to use the breakout rooms to break out people into rooms, and I'm going to come up with some kind of structure, maybe along the lines of a wee kind of challenge, obviously whiskey focused, things that you could do almost like in teams, and then maybe reach out to the bottle chasers in Glasgow perhaps, or the moderators, people that I know to host each room, and then I could kind of hop around each room and I could be able to speak to each room when there's only kind of 5, 6, 8, something of that order in each room. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to try and put together a Zoom gathering, if you like, for patrons before the summer break. Thanks to everybody who joined in, and please accept my apologies for those who couldn't because it was too short notice for me, but I hope you understand why. And also the folk that did join in that I never get a chance to see face to face. Hopefully I'll be able to rectify that next time. And also I kind of bullied Scott Monroe into having a dram tonight. He came on before we went live and he talked about he doesn't have a dram in hand and he's not going to bother tonight. But people I could see were just starting to twist his arm a wee bit, and I just came in and said, Kilted Moose without a dram, Kilted Moose, without a dram, is it even a valid vPub? And he said, okay, I'll go and I'll have a pour. And then I felt really bad. Nobody needs to have a dram in their hand to enjoy the vPub. I hope that's very, very clear. And I apologise to Scott, and I hope I didn't bully him into having a dram. If he's still here, I hope it was worth his while. Maybe you can just have the one, Scott, and that'll do you for a Thursday night. I also want to talk a wee bit, while there's so many of you in, about Belfast Whisky Week. Oh my goodness. I'm going to sign up. It's hitting right about holiday time for me, unfortunately, at the end of July. But from the 24th of July to the 1st of August, Belfast Whisky Week. Go and check them out on Eventbrite or their Facebook page. Fantastic event for the middle of summertime, all about whiskey. It's not just about Irish whiskies. There's a huge focus on Irish whiskey, of course, but they're doing everything. The gamut of tastings that they're putting together is amazing. I spoke about it last week at length. I don't need to speak about it so much tonight, but just ask you to consider the Belfast Whisky Week if you're looking for something to do of a whiskey nature, virtual tasting wise, in the last week of July. What Paul's been able to put together there is exactly the type of event that I felt could do really, really well, even before the situation of everybody being locked up at home came along. I think that it reaches out and it gives people so much more inclusion. And the selection of whiskies and the themes that they've put together for that event is amazing. I hope a lot of you have already had a wee look. The range of the tastings probably pricing about £30 through to some real super, super premium things are way into the hundreds. But there's lots of really, really great value things there as well. A lot of it's sold out. A lot of it's already sold out. But the last time I checked a few days ago, there were still lots of really interesting tastings available. So when I was speaking to Paul, I promised him that I would give it a wee bit of airspace, because I think that's the type of inclusive, progressive, really interesting whiskey events that excite me and that I would like to get behind and support if I can. Luna Aaron saying Holdsworth had a great tip. Have you tried Chivake? That's my favourite blend, Aquavitae. Okay, Traic, I think is the spelling or something like that. So I've got Chivake here. This Gaelic whiskey, and it is blend. It's grain and malt. A wee bit peaty, but not heavily peated. It's there, but I figured it was just that wee bit the wrong side of obscure, honestly, Chivake. Maybe it's available in much more markets than I imagined, but it's quite small batch blend from the Gaelic Whiskey Company. Chivake, you might remember that it was in one of the pronunciation videos that I did. And I talked about don't ask for tea bag. If you ask for tea bag, you're not going to get a dram. But it's Chivake Gaelic whiskey, and it is absolutely a blend. Dora Pass Whiskey is saying, speaking of Madeira, really enjoying Glenmurray Madeira cask project. I'm glad you've got into that, Tim, because it's two things. It's not really what you would expect from a Glenmurray, as I said at the time. And there is something quite unique about that bottle. And the more drams I've had out of it, the more I've realised that, but the more I've come to enjoy it as well. I'm actually enjoying the Madeira project more than the Glenmurray 18. And I mean, there's not a huge difference in price. I think the Madeira project is about 18 or 20 pounds cheaper. But I'm glad to have that in the collection. I'm enjoying it, Tim, and I'm glad you are too. Laddie Whiskey Nerd is saying, took me a while, but I've owned 2 blends from Compass Box. So this is 1.01% of my collection on Whiskey Base. They don't call you Whiskey Nerd for anything, Rombout. Absolutely. I mean, I know that a lot of us don't really connect with blends. But let's imagine that, the blend industry has built up all that steam throughout the 19th century. Along comes the Pattison crash, and it hits a bit of a disastrous blip for a while. We lose some distilleries back in the early 20th century because of that, and it has a bit of a knock and a hit. And then again, First World War comes along, and again it gets hit a wee bit again. And what happens then? But Prohibition kicks in the States. You know, one of the, or if not the biggest market at that time, certainly the biggest growing market at that time, suddenly says no, Prohibition. And again, Ireland made a crucial error there, where Ireland kind of decided that they were going to make sure that they went along with the Americans' will for Prohibition. The Scots made whiskey available in huge quantities to neighbouring countries, to Cuba, to Canada, and the Scotch industry, I imagine, fully understood exactly where that whiskey was going to end up. But what happened, because that was on the back of the days of branding, because the whiskey was already in a bottle with a brand on the front, didn't matter that it was bootleg, didn't matter how it was getting to the customers, but this was made available to them when other brands, American whiskey, had been obliterated. Irish whiskey wasn't available anymore. But through less than legal routes, Scotch whisky was made available. Lefroy was famously even prescribed as medicine back in those days. But yes, so that meant that when Prohibition finally lifted, and I think, when did that happen? About 1930, 1931, people were familiar with the Scotch brands, blended whisky brands. So there was already a foundation in place for Scotland to continue that growth in the US. And blends, Scotch blends, succeeded hugely from Prohibition. They managed to turn something that was very bad for them into something that long-term worked out really quite well. Andrew Butler is saying, my Grey Parrot and Gordon Bennett blends or Benit blends are based on the Pattison crash. Yeah, I can imagine. That was a dodgy time, a dark time in the Scotch whisky industry's history. And we lost a lot of distilleries back then. We lost a lot of, it did take a significant knock backwards. That was around about 1901, I think, 1902, something of that order. But yes, it's early 20th century was not a good time for Scotch generally. In the run up to the Second World War, it got a wee bit better. But then post-war, again, a huge boom in Scotch whisky growth and demand. So from 1945 right through to 1980, in the late 70s, let's say, there was a huge boom time, huge investment, huge expansion throughout Scotland. And it was all on the back of the blended industry. Single malts were a sliver, 1 to 2%. Again, it was a local thing or something that was being preserved by specialists, or the Gordon MacPhails of this world, or the Cadenheads, or somebody of that order. We heard from Douglas Lang, who was on the vPub recently, in recent weeks. He was talking about how his dad started up post-war, and how he was originally just started off with a few casks and managed to build up from there. But things got really exciting when single malt became a category. But again, it's a very, very recent thing. And it's very much riding on the coattails of blends. Okay, let's go to my top two, my two favourite drams here in this lineup. Peat on this one. Absolutely peat. Not heavy peat, not Skogsmart peat for sure. It's a wee bit tannic thing going on here. So a drier nose, drier fruit, but still quite rich. Nicer texture. I think even if I was sipping that in contrast with a nice malt of a similar kind of age and price and ABV and things, I think I would struggle. I know it's a blend. I don't have any malts in here, but that's, as blends go, that's malty, which is what's made me think this is the the King Street, Great King Street from Compass Box. This is a Glasgow blend, I think. The bitterness on the finish is not there. This has got a nice finish, a Moorish finish, lovely, gentle spice. Smoke is there, smoke lingers, but it's very quiet. A little bit of char. This is a nice sipper, really nice sipper. I'm very confident this is one of the two Compass Box ones, and the quality is there. Yes, it's twice the price of the other whiskies in the lineup, the exception being Bailey Nickel Jarvie, but you can see why. Whenever we sip, and then I'll have the first one. Graham Fraser saying, just got a newly published book on the Pattersons. It concludes they were only a small part of the early 20th century whiskey crash. Yeah, it was the domino effect, wasn't it? But they were the ones that get caught. They were the first. And it exposed. So I guess it was a big kind of cleansing thing. It really had to mean that there would be a lot more regulation in there, a lot more traceability in the Scotch whisky industry. So again, that serendipity kicks in as well. And we have a horrible situation like that, where there are crooks basically involved. But you go through this watershed and the industry is cleansed. That happened about 120 years ago. Let's go into this first one. Tom, good to have you in. Tommy's saying, when I heard John talk about the Great King Street blends, he said he wanted to have a higher ratio of malt to grain like it was done years ago. Absolutely. So I don't remember who it was that talked about the artist blend being a bit Clynelish, because this has got to be it. It's not overtly Clynelish, but it has more than a whiff of that about it. Blend, malt, forget the category. This is just a nice whiskey. It's not a kick the door down whiskey. It's just a nice whiskey. Would I pick it over the peaty one? And I say peaty with a very small p, by the way. I'm not sure what to do here, which one of these I'd put first. I want to do that. I want to kind of... Texture-wise, they're similar. The Glasgow blend has got a bit more punch. It's a bit louder. It speaks to you a wee bit louder. There's more obvious hooks to it. Whereas this... I'm saying this is the Glasgow blend. Whereas this artist blend, if I'm right, honey, malty, barley, biscuity barley. So that kind of sugary, sometimes just a wee bit solventy thing that you get from grain. It's not here. It's not obvious. And obviously, as I've sipped through these, if I've got these in the right order, you know, I'm sipping from the weakest through to what I believe to be the best. So that's it's going to exaggerate the experience with the better ones in contrast to the less good ones, if that makes any sense. Chris is saying we should start a campaign for Clynelish being added to the Oxford English Dictionary. And Precarious David saying Chris might need to cite you first use by one. Aquavitae. Ah, see, okay. That I've used it first. There is a quiz tonight. I haven't done Is It a Speyside tonight, and that's very much down to me. I've been a wee bit unorganised and lazy in the last few days. and I didn't give anybody any notice, so I didn't want to reach out like yesterday or today for kind of a short notice thing. What I'm going to do with it, is it a Speyside game? I'm going to keep that going, but I'm going to limit so that it's not out there all the time. It'd be nice to kind of keep it quite fresh and interesting. I'm going to put a public spreadsheet out there that people can add their name to the list, the waiting list, and people will be able to see as I fill up a kind of timetable, if you like, in the future going forward, what slots are available on what nights, and they can put their name down, drag their name on a night that they're able to commit to or be available. That's my idea. Hopefully I can make it happen. And that kind of takes a wee bit of organisation and admin away from me for folk that want to play a wee game of Is It a Speyside and come onto the vPub and have a bit of fun and just to kind of let the community see, put a face to the name and things like that. That's kind of my idea for that going forward. Stevie is saying once a month or so is good for Is It a Speyside, I'd say. And Hellswood is saying, shucks, Andy's had his hair cut specially, lol. Listen, Andy's on the waiting list, no problem there, Helen, don't worry about it at all. I think you're interested in coming back and having another wee go as well, so you're very welcome to put your name down. Anybody is. Emery McGill is here. Emery, good to see you. Tyler Valdal, that looks like a new Tyler. Nice to welcome you in here if it is. Here in Toronto, Ontario. Fantastic. And he's talking about a whiskey being there is a great deal. Emery is saying there's no question of the quality blending that goes into Compass Box releases. The only question is whether they're worth the price. Specifically, the limited editions from Compass Box can be super expensive. The core range is not expensive. It's expensive right up until you taste them. And that's kind of what I'm hoping I'm going to get from these. Like I say, I enjoyed my time with the Glasgow blend. I didn't replace it. It's been out. I've not had it here in the cupboard for 18 months at least. I didn't go straight out and replace it again because it's a 30, 40 pounds bottle of whiskey. It's not an age statement, but it's unchill filtered. It's 43%, and it's a different take on a blend. And I think that's one of the two that I'm struggling as to whether it's the best tonight. I think the two Compass Box are the ones that I've chosen as my favourite tonight. I think the one that's last is the White Mackay. I think second from last is probably the Hanky Bannister, which would mean the two middle ones, which there's not a lot in terms of enjoyment between them, but they're different things. I think this one with the peat kind of gives this away. Let's see. No peat. Suddenly no peat. Maybe that's on the back of the Great King Street. I think that's a black label. So I put black label in fourth, what I think is a black label in fourth, and the Bailey Nickel Jarvie in second. And I think the two Compass Box Great King Streets I've put first and second. They're a different animal altogether. Yes, they say blended Scotch whisky on the label, but in spirit, pun intended, I suppose, they're different animals to the rest because these are obviously, they're either using much better grain, much more mature grain, or they're using a higher proportion of malt. It's a different experience. I think that these in a blind lineup would be difficult to pick out for most folk from malt whisky of a similar standard. Jimmy Legacy, once I get my infallible, is it a Speyside spreadsheet completed? I will be all over that game. I look forward to that, Jimmy. I've played with the idea myself. What I've been doing recently, or when we were playing it on the vPub, is I was trying to kind of commit to memory core ranges of products, which is more difficult than you might imagine. Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying Great King Street isn't a focus on peat. That's why he created Great King Street Glasgow and other experimental editions. I see. The way I understood it, it was the more of the kind of the clientele of Glasgow during the Victorian times would have been looking for more bolder sherried style with a smoky peat element. And then kind of the more kind of subtle flavors, the more delicate, nuanced things would have been more to the palate of people on the East Coast. That's the way I understood it to be, but I'd be interested to get John Glazer's take on it, what his plan for the two styles was. Okay, let's work this out what it is. How are we getting on for time? 11 o'clock, not bad tonight. It's easier to manage when it's just me monologuing. I don't know how interesting or fun it is for you guys, though. I think this is difficult to drink, honestly. It's not my favourite. What is that? It's like I'd hate being horrible or negative, but it tastes like fake whiskey. It tastes acrid and it tastes thin. And there's a burnt wood thing, a char thing that's not pleasant. I think it's this. So if the wee dot I've put on this is a wee green dot, the white Mackay. I think that this should have a green dot. Oh my goodness. It doesn't. That was me ready to lay into the white Mackay. This is not enjoyable. And this is a red dot. And this is 12-year-old whiskey. This is JW Black. And it is not going down well tonight at all. Wow. So this is one I thought was JW Black. Everything is fantastic. And then at the end, it just dies. This must be green. Yeah, this is green. So that's me. I got so the one that I've liked least tonight. This is why I did this blind. Amazing. I had this in my sights to be the one I liked least. And I was convinced when I was drinking Johnnie Walker Black Label, 12 years old, that I was drinking this. Absolutely amazing. So 6th place goes to Johnnie Walker Black Label. That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. Everybody should try as much as they can to enjoy it blind. I felt this number 5 was the Hanky Bannister. There's a sourness on the nose to this. Very appley. Lots of apple. Tart green, sour apple. The sourness, I think, is coming from grain. It's ever so slightly acrid, ever so slightly solventy. Nice arrival. Everything's encouraging, nice. Then at the end, doesn't make you want to go back. It's got a wee bit of bitterness in the finish. Not bad. Not great. I think this is Hanky Bannister. There's no sticker on this, so I think this is the one with the white dot. Yes, it is. A wee white dot on the bottom. So 5th place, Hanky Bannister, which means that 4th place goes to the one I was ready to chuck away, was the white Mackay. There you go. Look at the colour of it as well. Now you'd think, but look at the colour of the Johnnie Walker. And the glass is just about as dark. I hope you can see that there. So I was obviously allowing myself to be led by the colour in the glass as well. But I still get those mixed up. Wow, that's interesting. Now, don't let me lead you. Don't be put off by running out and buying yourself a bottle of Johnnie Walker Black Label if it's one that you've enjoyed in the past. This is a contemporary one. This is a Johnnie Walker Black Label I bought to do the Johnnie Walker comparison a few vPubs ago, end of last year, whenever that was, when I was checking out the 70s, 80s versus the 90s versus the contemporary one. And clearly despite its age, it's it's not a very well put together blend in my opinion tonight. It's sipping it against these other ones. It's the one that's come off the most awkward, and there's a bizarre kind of charred note in there. There's a bizarre kind of saccharine bitter thing going on. I'm really not enjoying it. Menno's saying they both look like they had a bit of fun in Ibiza. Jesse voicing is in. Good to have you, Jesse. Nice to have you back. I was gifted one of those JW Christmas boxes last year. I tried them all and donated them all to friends. JW, not for me. And Peter Hunt is saying blind tasting for the win. Absolutely. Let's see how we got on with the top three, though. Because Bailey Nickel Jarvie has been a lot of people's favourite blend for years until it was discontinued. A lot of people lamented that disappearing. I've put it in third place tonight, what I believe it to be in third place. Palate. First on the nose, all the kind of white stone fruits is still there. The kind of light pineapple note I talked about. This is nice. This is nicer. I'm obviously sipping these in the right order, so they should theoretically get nicer as I go through. I still think this is a Bailey Nickel Jarvie. There is grain on the finish. There is a grain note on the finish here. So if I'm right, this should have a blue dot. Yes, blue dot. So that puts us in good shape for... Now this is interesting because they're most expensive as well. So you would hope that they would perform a bit better. But you also want to know that it's been justified, that if they are adding more malt there, if they are putting better quality whiskies into the mix, to justify that higher price, we should be able to taste and experience that. And I'm absolutely certain that, yeah, this is a peated one. Oh. Okay, now I'm back to thinking this is the best one again, just on the nose. It's more my kind of style of whiskey. No comparison. Not even to that Bailey Nickel Jarvie. This is a far better product. This glass should have, this is the one I've put in number one. I've finally just decided this should be yellow. Yes, yellow dot. So that's a number one place, and the follow-up, very, very close second. Nice spice, dry, European oaky, tannicky thing. Peaty. Teeny bit of peat. Good whiskies, really good whiskies. The 50cl bottle, they take a bit of a hit for that. I don't know why these are 50cl. I just wasn't paying attention when I ordered them, clearly. But I'm okay with that. These are good whiskies. I'm glad I've got these in the collection. These will be good things to put in blind lineups, offer them to friends that will be able to enjoy them as malts, and I'll be able to tell them these are blends. These are well put together blends. These are lovely whiskies with very little defects whatsoever. Excellent stuff. Just to check, that should be orange. Indeed it is. And yellow. Orange and yellow. Finishing on those two in the wee dots, orange and yellow. But like I say, it was nothing to do with me trying to guess what was what. It was more about, and that's why I've been surprised by that Johnny Walker White and Mackay thing, right? We've got a non-age statement White and Mackay. It might be an older bottle, actually, that far beat a 12-year-old Johnny Walker Black. That's a bit of a turn-up, honestly, for the books. A turn-up. Be interested to hear what you think. Sasha and Kent is in saying, hi, Roy, good to have you, my friend. Luna Aaron is saying, Mr. Aquaviti knows his blends. Well done, Roy. I'm not so sure, Luna. I encourage all of you to do this kind of thing at home, whether it's malts, whether it's blends, whatever. Don't consider that you're trying to do some kind of blind, super analytical, testing yourself, testing the whiskies. It's just a bit of fun. Pour 2 or 3 whiskies, mix them around. And as long as the Glencairns are clear Glencairns with no logos or whatever on them, and you just put a wee dot, a wee coloured dot, or whatever it is, a wee marker down the bottom that you can't tell what's in which, and just test the whiskies. Once you've done that, have a bit of fun and test yourself and see if you can blind match them up, by all means. But by that time, you've already decided which one you're enjoying best. And sometimes, I'll even go as far to say at least half the time, you can be really, really surprised. And it doesn't matter whether it's bourbon or malt or blends or whatever you're doing it with. It's great fun. Andrew Butler is saying 500 ml, I think, is a size that's allowed on both sides of the Atlantic. So maybe that's why. I'm not sure. I heard that the Boutique Whiskey Company were doing their releases in the States in 750 ml bottles, whereas in the UK they're 50 cl, 500 ml. So I'm not sure. I really don't know about that. I really don't know. Anything else to talk about? I've talked about Is It Space Age? I've talked about. I do want to mention something. Look at this really cool sample set that came through from me. This has come from Switzerland. This has come from Philip, who is often in. He may or may not be in tonight, but he sent me some Swiss whiskies. But what he's done is he's done a really, really nice thing, is that he's given me 2 grams of each. He's given me 2 of these and 2 of these. Now I'm going to try and pronounce this right. I think it's Langatun. Swiss single malt whiskey. This is their Old Bear smoky whiskey. But what's interesting about what Philip sent me is that he's sent me the branded Old Bear, which is 40% ABV, but he's also given me a cask strength Old Bear. Now there's no age statement on it, but it's at 63.2%. So that's something that is going to be fun, to be able to sip the 40% alongside the cask strength Swiss whiskey. Thank you so much for that, Philip. He's also sent me a couple of other drams, one of which I've tried before, one of the oddest, strangest, and most remarkable drams I've ever had in my life. Cadenhead's Small Concern. This is the Cradle Mountain. I think it doesn't say Cradle Mountain on it, but this is actually from Whiskey and Tunes, which is a friend of Philip. And it was Whiskey and Tunes, I understand, that introduced Philip to the channel and the vPub. So I think these have been sent to Philip and sent on to me alongside a Belgrove Rye Noir, Rye and Pinot Noir at 60% ABV, 100% Rye Belgrove. Wow. So fantastic, Philip. Thank you so much for those. I mentioned those because I've yet to try a Swiss whiskey. So I'm going to get a chance to try some Langatun as well. Mikey has just arrived. Haven't missed the start of the quiz, have I? Mikey, if you're here for the quiz, you're in good to perfect timing. Can anybody guess what the theme of tonight's quiz is going to be? Listen, if you're willing to stay for the quiz, please stay. You might have a bit of fun. The questions tonight range from ridiculously easy on a couple to ass hat on a couple more. There will be tricky ones in there, but generally I think I've got a decent mix tonight. The theme, of course, tonight for the quiz is blends and blended whiskey. We're in a situation now with blends, just to summarize, that they are very much part of the whiskey landscape, huge part of the whiskey landscape. But if you walk into any specialist retailer, you'll see that it's almost reversed. The specialist retailer will have 85, 90% blend single malt Scotch versus only 5, 10, 15% blends, typically. And that's the same in duty-free nowadays. Honestly, yes, they have much more volume, much more bottles there, but the range, there's much more granularity, there's much more choice in single malt, and that's very much what it's about. A blend, when a blend is put together, it's supposed to be trying to get to something that gives a little bit of a lot. It gives a lot of everything. I think when Alistair Day was on a week ago, he used the cliche that they put something together that the end product is greater than the sum of its parts. And he said, he apologized for using a cliche. And I said, no, Alistair, until there's something better to describe what you're talking about, it's not a cliche. It's still the best way to describe it. But that's not what we've been doing tonight. Maybe you could argue that that's the 2 Compass Box ones get close to that, but the rest of these are not doing that. They are not putting together lots of malt whiskies onto a good quality grain base in order to create something that's better than the sum of its parts. They're bringing out a product that's bulk, mass market, price point whiskey. Yes, the quality has to be there. It still has to meet a minimum point for quality. But that's what the market is there for. It's to bring 40% whiskey at a good price and make it tasty. Some of these achieve that, some of these not so much. I'm really disappointed about the Johnnie Walker Black tonight. It's a huge disappointment to me, but that's why I did it blind. The Compass Box whiskies get closer, much closer, to bringing something that theoretically is potentially greater than the sum of its parts. We don't get to taste the individual component parts. With Compass Box, we'd be able to taste Spice Tree. They always put a wee bit of Spice Tree into everything. Call it their Highland blended malt, which is, I believe, is a Spice Tree. That is a different thing. The Tweeddale blends, for example, from R&B Distillers, Alistair Day was on last week. That's a different animal altogether. 46% ABV, unchill filtered, natural colour, all written on the label. Fantastic stuff. Again, a different animal. We're looking at premium whiskies, malts, premium blends, all of that, versus bulk whiskies, cheap malts, easy access malts, 40% malts, and the blend market sits in that category. We, as enthusiasts, tend to focus on the premium stuff, whether it be single malt, blended grain, well-aged grain, premium blends, that kind of thing. It's a different thing. And this just goes to illustrate that. However, blends play a huge part in Scotch whisky landscape and the history, how we've arrived here today. If it wasn't for the fantastic entrepreneurship within the blend industry 100, 150 years ago, if it wasn't for all of the kind of serendipitous little things that came along on the way, the Coffey still, phylloxera, grocers blending their own stuff, the Pattison crash, yes, the war, Prohibition, post-war whiskey boom, Hollywood, massive marketing. If it wasn't for all of that, we wouldn't have the blend landscape that exists today. And I guarantee you, if we didn't have that, we wouldn't be able to enjoy all the fantastic single malts, the majority of which has changed in recent years, yes, the majority of which exist solely on the back of the blend industry. The next time that somebody offers to pour you a dram of something and you see that it's a blend, don't turn your nose up at it. Go into it as open-minded as you possibly can, and I'm sure all of you absolutely would. I think it's a fascinating story. I know that all of you enjoy reading and discovering Scotch whisky history in general, and understanding a wee bit more about why the whisky that we enjoy today exists in the shape that it exists in. Rombout is saying, I am on a budget this month and the next since I bought too many Le Creuset cooking pans. But we've been doing a lot of that, haven't we, Rombout, cooking at home? Jimmy, like I said, a lot of malts only position themselves as premium. Quality is quality. Premium is a mirage. I would agree with that. Eric Cunliffe is saying, you said that with such insight and clarity. Thank you, Roy. Eric, you can come again. Thank you, buddy. Hoyt is saying that is so different from the 90s. Hard to find single malts, many blends. Absolutely. We've got the choice. I'm constantly saying it. We are very, very fortunate to be enjoying whiskey in the current landscape. It's never been, in terms of choice and variety, it's never been as good as this. Whiskey Novice is saying, Big Pete, I love Douglas Slaying, I love what they do, but Big Pete for me isn't as good as the sum of its parts. Because there's Port Ellen, for example, in Big Pete. I have to agree. I think out of all the regional malts, I've got a Scallywag, I've got a Timorous Beastie, I've got a Rock Island. I don't have any Epicurean, and I don't have any Gauldrons, and I don't have any Big Pete. I've not tried all the Epicureans. I know they tried a few different versions. I've tried the Cast Strength and the regular one. The Gauldrons I've tried. Big Pete. But the other three are excellent whiskies to me and have a place that I can use them and I can share them with people and talk about them in a certain way. And that would be true for Big Pete as well. But yeah, I get where you're coming from, Jim. Andrew's in Prestige Liquids. He's saying, just like everything else, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Everything that I share on this vPub, with very few exceptions, is subjective, of course, but we all understand that. It's and I think we come to accept that the more whiskey we enjoy, the more whiskey we share, the more opinions that we listen to and read about, and the more fickle that they are, the more we come to understand that, you know, I'm not suggesting take everything with a pinch of salt, but don't take everything as gospel. I watched a wonderful Vox video and recently, I don't know if you watch Vox, it's a YouTube channel. There's lots of pretty cool little short videos that you can enjoy. And it was talking about blind tasting wine. And they had like an $8 bottle of wine, a $50 bottle of wine, and a kind of mid-price $20, $25 bottle of wine. And most people didn't enjoy the expensive one. And even whiskey experts, it was talking about how when they did massive testing of blind tasting, that whiskey experts were contradicting themselves and they couldn't be relied upon in blind tastings and things. And that made perfect sense to me. I like to think that if I had these 6 same drams a week from now, I would put them in the same order. But I would not be surprised in the slightest if the order was different, sometimes even completely different. And I think we all accept that as part of blind tasting and a part of whiskey and a part of us as humans enjoying the stuff as well. 2 minutes, I'm going to start up this quiz before I let you all slink off to your beds or your work day, whatever it is you're doing. Graham Fraser is saying Compass Box Peat Monster is a fine dram. I agree. Love it a lot. Also enjoyed very much their No Name, which was very peated. I didn't try their No Name 2, but I enjoyed their No Name. I thought it was fantastic. I don't know if it was much better than the Peat Monster, if I'm honest. Jimmy Legg is saying, obviously agreeing with me is the only way to be objective. And Hoyt is saying that Serendipity has 23-year-old Ardbeg and 12-year-old Glenmurray. I may have to try it, but it's a rare collector's item now, £235. And that actually makes me think that it probably potentially was likely to be a mistake to put 12-year-old Glenmurray into a vatting of 23-year-old Ardbeg. Had to have been a mistake. Andrew Butler is saying King's Ransom seems rather perfumey tonight. King's Ransom. Is that a blend, Andrew? Molasses is saying, I recently poured a dram of Timorous Beast 18 for a friend who has always avoided blends. He loved it, of course. But again, it's blended malt, and it's lovely as well. It's easy to drink. I find it, whiskies, blended malt's harder to dial in and tease certain things out. It's kind of much, it's a bit like when you make an infinity bottle at home, especially when it's just they try it the same night or within a few days. Everything's kind of so busy and loud, and it's difficult to tease individual notes out. Hellswood is saying, I often find that we return to a dram and think, why did we enjoy that so much last time around when now it only appears to be okay? I get that completely, Helen. Give it a few weeks, go back, and then you'll love it again. I get that all the time. Absolutely. Okay, we're going to go in and do a wee bit of quiz just to let everybody know, for those of you that are still in, that there's only a couple of vPubs left, maybe only one more. I think 2. I think I'm going to go out to the 16th. So that'll mean that there's one on the 9th of July and one on the 16th of July, and then it'll be the summer break. I will do my very best to have 1 or 2 pre-recorded videos that I can share with you during the summer break so that you've got kind of something to be getting on with. But I'm going to take a wee break for a few weeks during the summer like I do every year. So there's only a couple of vPubs left. I would love for one of those vPubs to have a guest, but it's not confirmed yet. And that would mean that the other one would potentially be, if I can make it work from a technical perspective and a climate weather perspective, I'd love to be able to do a recycled review live. I'm not sure I can pull it off, but I'm thinking about giving it a try. I'll chew it over a wee bit more, and if I think I can do that before the summer shutdown, I'll be doing that. I'll also be planning for patrons only. I'll be trying to do something on Zoom as well. So it's going to be a busy few weeks before a break for summer. But just to let everybody know, there's only a couple of vPubs left. Graham Fraser is saying 2 vPubs, please. And Russell Whiskey is saying you deserve a break. Russell, thank you so much. This has been a busy, busy time for the channel, for me, for vPubs, but it's been fantastic. It's been a huge pleasure, and the support means that there is nothing to complain about. It's, if anything, I've been energized and motivated to do it and to bring the extra content to you. I was just nervous that I was going to drown the airwaves a wee bit, and I'm very glad that you've been so receptive to all. Good luck for the quiz, everyone. The theme tonight is blends. And of course, as usual, it's multiple choice. There is a couple of stinkers in here, honestly, but there's a couple of good, easy ones as well. Good luck, everybody. You're only keeping your own score. And I'll chime in and see how you're getting on throughout. Okay, question 1. Which of the following brands is a blended Scotch whisky? Let's do a wee softball at the beginning. Which is a blended Scotch whisky of these 3? A, Naked Grouse. B, Monkey Shoulder. Or C, Black Bottle. Jesse Voicen is saying recycled live. Yes. I don't know if I could pull it off, Jesse, but I would maybe give it a wee try. I think one of the big things about recycled reviews is the fast speed of it. Take that in a vPub environment, make a 2-hour-long recycled review. Don't know how it would go down. Well, it looks like absolutely everybody seems to agree with me that Black Bottle is indeed. Now, Whiskey Jason's in here with a different logo tonight. What's that going on? Is that the wrong Whiskey Jason that's in? He's down as a moderator, so it must be the right Jason, but he's saying B, Monkey Shoulder, is a blended Scotch whisky. No, unfortunately, Monkey Shoulder is a blended malt. The blended Scotch here is Black Bottle. Naked Grouse is also a blended malt. Very good value, very inexpensive as well. Only malt whisky and Naked Grouse and Monkey Shoulder. But Black Bottle, as we spoke about earlier, is a Distell brand now, and they've brought back the peatiness there. Now, I don't know if it will be extremely skog-smart peaty, let's say. But yes. Question 2. It's believed the first ever filmed commercial was for Dewar's Scotch Whisky. When was it? Now, this is the first time that they had used filmed footage to advertise a product with Scotch Whisky. The first advert, cinematic advert that was ever seen was a Scotch Whisky ad, and it was for Dewar's. When was that? A, 1856, B, 1897, or C, 1928. Now, there are different, depending on where you research this, there are different answers as to when it actually was, but within the space of about 3 years, we're here. It was the first ever filmed advertisement for any product, any commercial product. Was it 1856, 1897, or 1928 for Dewar's Whisky? You can see this advert on YouTube. You would just need to do a search for, I think it's called Ancestors or something like that. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on various web resources, marketing agencies and things like that. It's not particularly good ad, as you can imagine, but it's funny nonetheless. And it's the ancestors are pictures and paintings on the wall. The guy's at a table having a dram, and as he pours the whiskey, the pictures become alive, and it's people, and they come out of the pictures and they come down and they do a wee dance and things and have a dram before they get back into their pictures again. And that was back in 1897 or thereabouts. Some people say 1898, some people say 1900, but it's of that order. And that was the first ever ad. Amazing. B. Question 3. This bottle of banknote, 5-year-old, is 40% malt and 60% lowland grain. But how much would it cost today? I just want to know how much this bottle of banknote would cost you. A wee bit more than £20. B, around £90 at auction. Or C, a little less than £1,200. That bottle that's pictured there, tell me how much you would need to pay to take that home. Dogs Have No Uncles think it's A, a wee bit more than £20. Lassie Hjort Oatsman, I hope I'm pronouncing your name well, thinks it's C. So many of you thinks it's C. Emery McGill thinks it's A. Floyd Rodriguez, B. This looks like a tricky one. And Paul Tabanor is saying, oh, come on. What do you think, Paul? Do you think it's a terrible question? Do you think it's an asshat question? Or is it just that you're surprised that not many people know that Banknote 5-year-old costs £29.95 at the Whisky Exchange, despite its branding and labelling, despite the way that bottle looks? It's a contemporary blend, and it's a respected blend as well. A lot of people like it. I tasted this at the Bonaccord. They were serving it by the dram. I thought it was decent enough. It was an okay starter whiskey. But I thought it was quite interesting, the branding as well. You might remember that Scott Monroe mentioned this a wee bit earlier in the stream. We talked about this, and Scott Monroe mentioned in the stream that it was a 20 quid bottle of whiskey. So it was mentioned. Question 4. Due to a single malt shortage in 2003, Diageo fell into trouble over the labelling of which pure malt? Pure malt was still a thing back in 2003. 2009 hadn't come around yet. Was it A, Cragganmore, B, Dalwhinnie, or C, Cardew? Which of those three did Diageo find themselves in trouble over the labelling of back in 2003? This was due to a single malt shortage from one of those three distilleries. So they had to put together a pure malt, and they got their knuckles wrapped for it. Caused a big problem. And it actually was crucial in some of the definitions that were used for Scotch whisky going forward, and tightening up the definition. Graham Fraser is saying C. Ralphie recently covered this. Andrew Butler is saying I bought a bottle on purpose. So Andrew, obviously you've answered. Roberto Matteo is in. Good to see you, my friend. Good to have you, buddy. Malt Mafioso just round the corner from me. Wonderful to have you in playing the quiz as well. But I'm sorry, Roberto, you're wrong on this one tonight. Unfortunately, Cardew. Got a wee picture here for you to show you what they did. Cardew single malt was selling like hotcakes in Spain, especially, also in France and the UK. And they ran into a stock shortage. It was a 12-year-old product. So what they did is they removed the age statement and they vatted it together with other Speyside malts and labelled it as Cardew Pure Malt. Look at this. On the left, we've got the 12-year-old Cardew in its original single malt form, and on the right, we've got Cardew Pure Malt with no age statement, both at 40%, of course, but they look like the same product. And they're not even from the same distillery. The only change there is instead of Scotch single malt whiskey on the left, it says Pure Malt on the right. But that is utterly deceptive, and it was the right thing to do to tighten up the definitions, to give Diageo all the hell they deserved for doing that. And let's hope that we see less of that nonsense in the future. Both are age stated. You're absolutely right, Andrew. You're right. On the right, it does say 12 at the top. Good spot, my friend. Good spot. I was going from memory rather than paying attention. Greg's Whiskey is saying, I saw the bottle but didn't want to buy it. Aye. That was before I was into whiskey. That was 2003. It was 2 years before I had my first epiphany. Okay, here we have an image from a very famous advertisement. Probably my favourite, whiskey advert ever. I really love watching this. I find it fascinating technically. I find it fascinating from a historical perspective. But of course, I'm going to ask you which brand has been advertised here. Are we looking at a still from a famous grouse advert, from a Grant's advert, from a Johnny Walker advert? Go and watch this advert. If you search for it, I'll tell you what it's called. You can find it on Vimeo, YouTube, all over the place. It's just a wonderful ad, hypnotic almost to watch for so many reasons. Greg is saying yes. That's when I feel old. It was poured for me free in a shop. I didn't buy it, but it was around £200 only a long time ago. That's because it became a collectible then, because I know they struggled to sell it immediately after the relabeling, the repackaging. I can tell you that absolutely everybody got this right. We're certainly looking at a marvelous advert, fantastic piece of art, honestly. It was a Johnny Walker advert. Tells you about the history of Johnny Walker. It intertwines a lot of the history of Scotch generally. A lot of what we've been talking about tonight actually is mentioned in this ad. 5-minute long ad, but just a work of art, single take. Robert Carlyle, famously, its opening line is, "Hey, Piper, shut it." And it is Donnerpass Whisky saying Francis Begbie. That's absolutely right, Robert Carlyle. Brilliant ad. Question 6, now discontinued. The much-loved Bailey Nickel Jarvie blend, you've seen it tonight, from Glenmorangie was named after what? Where did Bailey Nickel Jarvie get its name? Was it a magistrate from Rob Roy? Was it lawyers from Glasgow? Or was it a whiskey exporters from Leith? How did Bailey Nickel Jarvie get that name? A magistrate from Rob Roy being the book written by Walter Scott, I would guess. Is Walter Scott, is that right? B, lawyers from Glasgow. Or C, whiskey exporters from Leith. I did read a wee bit of the label tonight, but I know that I didn't give anything away with regards to this. Fantastic packaging. Kind of love the kind of 19th century look and feel about it, the Victorian feel. It tells you lots of stuff on the back about the story. And they actually mention the Bailey Nickel Jarvie, we believe, boasts the highest malt content of any blended Scotch whisky. A whisky of breeding, maturity and quality beyond question. The Bailey would not have settled for anything less. There you go. Wee bit of marketing flannel for you there, but I can tell you that Bailey Nickel Jarvie was, in fact, a magistrate from the book by Sir Walter Scott. So many of you were absolutely bang on. Famous for an altercation in an inn, a pub, where he was a man of such manners that his weapon, his knife, his sword, whatever it might have been, became rusted and stuck in its scabbard. He couldn't draw it to defend himself. So he famously reached for a red-hot poker and set light to the guy's clothes instead. There was no bloodshed, and he managed to get out of the situation without losing any honour, so the story goes. Question 7. What happened in 1830 that changed Scotch whisky forever? Graham Fraser is already breathing a sigh of relief. After 6 questions, he's on a pass mark, 5 out of 6. Well done. We talked about this tonight. In 1830 specifically, which of these events changed Scotch whisky forever? A, was it the Excise Act? That was specifically to grant legal licenses for distilleries. Was it the phylloxera plague, or whatever you want to call it, hitting Europe? Or was it the invention of the coffee still? 1830, I'm looking at A, the Excise Act, B, phylloxera, or C, the invention of the coffee still. Phylloxera, you would call that what, an infestation? Vassal Glagola, that looks like a new name. Welcome in. And Ulichin as well, looks like a new name. I think maybe that's familiar. Maybe I've seen you before. I'm not sure, my friend. Regardless, welcome. Des is here. Good to see you. Malcolm Douglas is here. Claude Hooker is here. Man, fantastic to see so many of you in still. Right at the end, join a wee session of the quiz. Sid Martin thinks C, the invention of the coffee still in 1830. Absolutely, Sid. You're spot on. In Ace Coffee, invented it in 1830. I believe it was a year or two later before it made its way to Scotland to replace the kind of half-assed Stein continues still that they were experimenting with in Scotland. And it changed everything. Question 8. Buchanan's black and white blended Scotch branding features 2 dogs of which breed? These are famously the wee dogs that sit over Ralphie's right-hand shoulder called Fanny and Bobby. But what breed of dogs are they? A, West Highland Terrier, B, Scottish Terrier, or C, is it one of each? Since one's black and one's white, could it be one of each? A, black and white, West Highland Terrier, B, Scottish Terrier, or C, one of each. What's interesting is that when Buchanan's first launched their whiskey, it was simply a black and white label. It wasn't called black and white. It wasn't branded black and white. And it was only in time that people, through referring to it as black and white because of the labeling, that they adopted the branding, much like the Volkswagen Beetle, much like so many other things. And then even later than that, they added the wee dogs. But we want to know, were they West Highland Terriers, were they Scottish Terriers, or was it one of each? Whiskey Jason is saying he's not a dog person. I don't really know much about dogs myself. My kids do. And Mark is saying he fell behind on a phone call. He's on 3 out of 5, catching up. Let's see how you got on. I can tell you that yes, indeed, it's one of each. If you answered C, give yourself a point, and I'll show you a wee picture here of the black and white dogs. The Scottish Terrier on the left, the black Scottish Terrier on the left, and the West Highland Terrier, the Westie, on the right. And there you can see that's a relatively contemporary bottle of black and white there. Would have been a nice one to use in the lineup tonight, I think. Colin Brick is saying, oh, shh, he's not too happy about that. Jimmy Jazz is on 6 out of 8 already, fantastic. Whiskey Novice is saying, one's a Scottie and one's a Westie. Looks like Jim Ingram is indeed a dog person. Second from last, question 9, as well as a striding man, Johnny Walker has a square bottle, that should say, and a label set to exactly what? A, 44 degrees, B, 34 degrees, or C, 24 degrees. If it helps you at all, I'll hold this up to you and you can try and do it by your eye. I know I'm on a wee tiny thumbnail there, but there you go. Not a lot of emojis coming in tonight. It's a wee bit of an ASAC question, I think. Perhaps the last one could be as well. Lots of folk are going to be guessing this, I know, so I'm holding this up. Jimmy Legg is saying B. This is a little hatty. Des is giving me some ass hats, as is Whiskey Novice and Jimmy Jazz. Absolutely. I'd like to say thanks to my moderators tonight. I noticed McCallan Fine and Rare was in earlier. I don't see him in just now. I know that it's late for him. Steve A, Alistair Gray, Whiskey Jason, so many of you in helping out and clearing the comments that are being picked up. Catherine Bono is saying the visual helped. Well, I hope it did, Catherine. Let's see. It is C. Specifically 24 degrees. Apparently it's a well-known thing. I didn't realise it was a well-known thing. It was mentioned in that Robert Carlyle advert I talked about earlier, though. And people talk about it being adopted because they could use larger font and fit more text onto the label by putting it at an angle, and it gave them quite a visual burst because of the slanted label. Quite innovative for its time, I guess. Molasses is saying curses, and Jimmy Jazz is upset too. Ass hat. Stevie is saying thanks for holding the bottle up, or he'd have been off. And Des is saying I changed to the wrong degree. Okay, final question. Let's see who's on 9 out of 9 tonight. Andrew Butler always does very, very well on 9 out of 9. Fantastic. Any others? Dogs Have No Uncles is saying damn 8 out of 9. Dogs Have No Uncles. That's a fantastic score. Jesse Voicing on 6. Russell Whiskey on 6. Hoyt. Oops, just jumped there. Didn't see. Maybe you'd. Who else? Andrew Butler 9. I got that one. Steve A is on 9 out of 9 as well. Fantastic, Steve. Well done. Jimmy Legg is saying it's well known. Then I am a dope. Apparently, it's well known. Apparently, I think it's more well known in advertising and marketing and branding circles rather than whiskey circles, I think. Matt. Oh, it's jumped. Who was that? Matt E. Sorry, is on 8 out of 9. Fantastic, Matt. It's a great score. Emery McGill, 8 out of 9. And Ulichan is saying 11 out of 9, giving himself bonus points, which is absolutely fine. You'll never ever play against yourself. So it's fine. Last question, question 10, a wee bit of an asshat. Of the top 30 world whiskies, Indian whiskey outsells Scotch by how much volume? Now, clearly I'm talking about blended Scotch. That's where the volume comes from. This is the top 30 brands in the world, famously heavily populated by Indian whiskey. But I'm going to ask, how much does it actually outsell Scotch by? A, about 50% more. B, about 3 times as much. Or C, about 10 times more. Indian whiskey, global brands. This is by volume. This is by cases, actually. I can give you numbers by cases afterwards. But how much more Indian whiskey sells? 50% more, 3 times as much, or 10 times more. Steve A predicting asshats. Whiskey Novice predicting an asshat question. Aye. Lord Prefab, 7 out of 10. He's either giving himself this last one, or he's just deciding that he's not. Still a great score. Ulichan is saying special Coke. Graham Fraser is saying not a clue. Yeah, I have to admit that question 10 there's a wee bit of a habit forming in the vPubs that I'm throwing asshat questions in for the last question. But it's interesting. It's still interesting to me. I can tell you that out of the 100 and I don't know how many, out of the top 30 brands, let's say, 13 of them are Indian brands. Only 11 are Scotch. Only 2 are American. Only 2 are Japanese. Only 1 is Canadian. Only 1 is Irish. But out of the top 30, I can tell you that Indian outsells Scotch by a level of about 3 times as much. B. So at the top 30 brands, Indian whiskey outsells Scotch by about 3 times as much. Quite incredible. Of course, most of that is out in India, where they're drinking whiskey that we wouldn't term as whiskey because of the ingredients that it's made from, potentially molasses and things like that. But we wouldn't call that Scotch here. Jimmy Legg has bought me a dram to say thanks, Roy. So much fun. Can't wait for more Zoom. Jimmy, I'm determined to come up with a nice structure that Zoom event can be a really good, fun event as well. If I go on kind of the Patreon-only lock-ins, we often get about 60 or 70 people, and much smaller than the vPub, of course, but still a busy room. So to bring that into Zoom is going to take a wee bit of effort, a wee bit of planning, a wee bit of structure. I just need to come up with an idea, and I know I want to do it because it gave me a taste on Sunday night that could be fun, and it put so many faces to names for me as well. I think it'd be amazing. It's not going to replace anything that I do. It's not going to replace vPubs. It's not going to replace the lock-ins that I do for patrons right now. It's an extra layer. It's something extra to do occasionally that I think could bring extra value. It's not going to be charged for. It's going to be fully free, obviously for patrons, of course. And I think it could be just a good thing to do. I got feedback that New Dram Drinker had done one earlier on Sunday when the Sunday night that I did the live stream. From Luna Aaron, and people were in on that and said that it was good fun. It was really quite good. So if I could find a way to manage it, I think it would be great. By the way, if you're a supporter of the channel, if you're a member of the channel through YouTube, that is the Patreoniverse member rather than the barflies in here. So the higher tier, you'll also get an invite to those Zoom events as well. So you don't. For some of you who are reluctant to join in the Patreon community and the things that's going on in there, it's better to come inside Patreon because there's other things I'm doing in there, sharing little articles and stories and back things now and again with people, messaging and communicating in there. But if you don't want to come inside Patreon, and if you want to just support the channel through the YouTube membership, Patreoniverse tier would get you access to that as well, just to be clear. Listen, I know that it's been really difficult for everybody recently. There's been a lot of economical challenges, feeling it myself, believe me. I want to thank everybody for sticking with me on Patreon. Thank you all for your fantastic support. The fact that that thing can exist, the fact that that thing can make this continue and endure is amazing to me, and I'll always be very, very grateful, as I am grateful to Whiskey Malt Content, saying thanks for a great time, Roy, from Vlad. Vlad, I've got your dram here in front of me, my friend. I've got the Wild Fields 3-year-old sherry cask single grain Polish whiskey here. I'm looking forward to exploring that as well. Thank you, Vlad. Thank you so much for your dram. And Jim Whiskey Novice bought me a dram to say cheers, Roy. Great crack as always, and cheers, Barflies. Always a wee dram of this fantastic, great King Street artist blend to Vlad and Jim. Cheers, boys. Thank you so much. Who got 10 out of 10 tonight? Who managed 10 out of 10? Oh, wow. Looking for Andrew Butler. I'm not seeing any 10 out of 10. Somebody give me a 10 out of 10 emoji if somebody managed to get the 10 out of 10 tonight. Yes, Steve A managed it. Guest on the last one still managed a 10 out of 10. Well done, Steve A. I'm looking for Andrew Butler as well. Did he have a banana skin at the end? Jumped again just as I saw Andrew's name. Thanks. He's saying it actually was an easy quiz. So it looks like, Andrew, you managed to snag yourself another 10 out of 10. Andrew Butler, Orange Rule is saying, did get 10 out of 10. Fantastic stuff. Congratulations, Stevie. Congratulations, Andrew Butler. And thank you to everybody for joining me on another excellent wee Thursday night vPub. Like I say, I'm hoping for another 2. It'd be good. It'd be nice to line up a wee guest or some guests or come up with something. There's nothing in place right now. But that was because I didn't know if I was only going to have 1 more or 2 more. But I would love for one of those nights to have the weather. Listen, I can film it in the rain. I can be out there in the rain. That's fine. I can put a shelter over me or whatever. The problem would be wind, of course. If it's windy, I'd struggle. But I'd love to be able to do just a tongue-in-cheek vPub from out in the driveway, have the neighbours looking and wondering what the hell I'm doing out there, and just kind of have a bit of fun and come up with some of these bottles that I can't use in the regular vPub, use it in a live stream. Something along those lines. Listen, thanks to everybody. I hope you've enjoyed the topic tonight. It's something that fascinates me, really does fascinate me. Most of this content, most of the reading that I did was Charlie MacLean tonight. I was reading up through Charlie MacLean's books, a wee bit of Dave Broom, and really enjoying kind of reading about the history of whiskey. I get sucked in, found myself going down rabbit holes, giving me lots of inspiration for future vPubs, honestly. It's fantastic to see and understand the tradition of whiskey and how it ended up being what it is today, what we're all enjoying today. Stewie Baby saying, thanks, Roy. Good night, Barflies, sweet drams. Thank you, Stewie. Thank you for joining. Orange Rule saying, cheers, Roy. You're a great fella. Rule, you're a great fella too. Thank you so much, my friend. Tom Good is here. Fantastic, Tom. We're going to hear Tom Good's handiwork on the end credits scene as well. Tom is responsible for putting together the little bit of intro and outro music that I use for the vPubs. Tom, it's wonderful to have you in, my friend. Cheers. Thanks, Roy. Graham Fraser is saying, still the highlight of the lockdown week. Thank you, Graham. Thank you so much. Marku Mackinnon, good to see you, Marku, saying, first time with Teapot Patch 7. Probably would have skipped it if you didn't appreciate it as much as you did. Wonderful stuff. Cheers. I'm glad you're enjoying it. It is great stuff. A wee bit pricier than the past, but damn it, it's pretty unique and it's good. Andrew nailed the 10 out of 10. Stevie is saying, thanks, Steve. Eric Cunliffe is saying, cheers, Roy. Incredible as always. Time to go have a blend or 2. Jimmy Legg is saying, Hoyt bought you a dram. Oh, did I miss it? Hoyt Hemphill's dram. Yes, great vPub tonight, Hoyt. I did miss that. These guys are great. Thank you so much, boys. Thanks, Hoyt. Cheers. Thank you to everyone. Thank you so much. Roll end credits, and I really look forward to seeing you all back here a week from now, potentially. I can't promise anything, but potentially from my driveway. Thank you, all of you. You're very, very dearly loved. Cheers and good night.